Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's 12 o'clock on my side. We are letting people coming into the room in the interim, but I think in the interest of time, we're going to get going. And just a warm welcome from my side. I'm Annamarie van der Merwe, Executive Chair at FluidRock, and I'm joined today by our CEO, Ronelle Kleyn. We normally have external participants on our webinar, but if the word strategy appears in the topic, there is no better person I can think of than Ronelle to have in the room. They just go hand in hand, hand in glove, Ronelle and strategy. So I thought there's no better person to discuss and have the conversation with me today around purpose. So welcome to Ronelle. And I specifically appreciate her being here because she also is currently dealing with antibiotics and some very nice coughing sprees that could come up every now and again. So kind of right from the start to say Ronelle is going to do her best to keep the cough suppressed, but we will excuse her if she has to go off camera every now and again just to have a sip of water. But Ronelle, so thank you and welcome, and again to everyone with us in the room. If I can kind of kick off the conversation this afternoon, part of the FluidRock, the FluidRock vision, let me start with that. The FluidRock vision is to live in a society that's fueled by well-governed and ethical corporate citizens. That's why, that's our vision, that's our dream. And our purpose is to facilitate, to enable that environment, that society, with what we've got, what we have to the best of our ability. And part of that facilitation is to also enable what we believe is the need for a mindset shift in organizations. And it's for that reason that in 2024, we embarked on a journey, and specifically a journey on purpose. And it has been the theme of a number of our events during the course of the year. So I'm going to be quickly taking you through some of the highlights and just to get us all on the same page. This is and I'm going to be also referring a little bit to the book of Paul Polman on Net Positive. Paul Polman, some of you may know, was the ex-CEO of Unilever. And I'm going to refer to quite a bit to Paul's book, and a book that I can definitely encourage you to get your hands on if this topic that we're talking about today is of interest and of value to you. In the book, Paul quotes Peter Drucker as having said, profit for a company is like oxygen for a person. And as we saw during COVID as well, if you do not have enough of it, you're out of the game. But if you do think that all that life is about is breathing, then you're also kind of missing the plot. And we strongly believe at FluidRock as well, we often get challenged in the boardroom when we do bring what we believe to be fit for purpose governance into the organization, that this is, that this stifles entrepreneurship, that it only has cost implications. People really in leadership in boardrooms often seem to find it difficult to see the value and in fact the enhanced performance that these aspects, the topics that we touch on, can bring to the organization. And we kind of sometimes accused of not being being realistic, because all of these things cost money and you need to make profit. And we definitely not naysayers when it comes to profit, and that's why we relate to this quote and the statement made by Peter Drucker that obviously you need profit, but how we make that profit and what we can do to enhance that profit is really part of why we do what we do and why we talk about the topics that we do talk. And this year, as I've mentioned, we went on this journey And we said, let us really focus this year on the theme of purpose, organizational purpose. And as part of that, in all four, our In Conversation webinar events that we have hosted and will still be hosting the final one in November, we have been talking about organizational purposes. Those of you that were in the room with us in April may recall that Dr. Hurst came in with a very good presentation. Number one, to sort of talking about the rise of unsustainability and quoting horrendous percentages and statistics. And, you know, as Ronelle and I was talking before the webinar, we don't think that we need to spend too much time anymore on motivating, you know, the need for a different approach for sustainability. We all kind of get it, that there is no planet B, as I once saw a beautiful poster with Earth as the photo, and below it the little statement, very profound statement, short and sweet, there is no planet B. I think we kind of mostly get that. What we don't really get is how in our behavior, in our decision making, in our organizations, in the boardroom and the corridors, we sometimes, you know, unintentionally in our decision making impact negatively, and in fact enhances the problem instead of being, you know, bringing solutions to the table. And Dr. specifically spoke about the routine decision making and the often negative impact of the way we make decisions on sustainability. You'll recall, maybe if you were in the room, that she then gave us a structure and explained the different kind of decision-making models, coming to the conclusion that the best model is the decision-making model where purpose is embedded in everything we do. So it's part and parcel of who we are, in our DNA of our organizations. And that we not only, you know, look at how we create long-term financial value for our businesses, but simultaneously looking and focusing on generating appropriate value for all the stakeholders of the organization. And her theory was that that is the decision-making model we need in our boardrooms. In July, we had Carol Kondu here with us in the room to, you know, in conversation with. She represented an organization called Within. And Within is also a partner of a global organization called the Purpose Business. And they really focus particularly on purpose principles, helping organizations to also identify, define, and embed and effectively communicate the purpose of the organization. And again, for those of you that were in the room with us, you may recall that Carol took us through their own purpose as a company and explained the thinking behind every word in the purpose. So she gave us a framework, you know, to guide organizations to find their own framework, so to their own purpose. So today, Ronelle and I want to take it a step further, and we want to provide some guidance, you know, practical guidance at the hand of a bit of a case study, talking about what Unilever did to enable organizations to find their purpose. I don't think Ronelle or I will dare to say that we have the solutions, we have all the answers, and that we will give it, you know, we'll be able to give you that in 1 hour webinar. Our intent is really to get the conversation going in boardrooms, because that's, you know, where the influence, the leadership of organizations, for us to get the conversation going at that level. Because let's face it, you know, our world does need more courageous leaders that are absolutely willing to commit their organizations to deep change and to serving the world, and not just, you know, self-serving, self-interest, to pursue self-interest agendas, but to look at the greater good, you know, and the impact that they have on the world. And that's what we're doing today. And in November, with the final In Conversation with, we will be bringing a representative of eHealth Africa to the room to also illustrate, you know, some real life companies that are absolutely committed to pursuing their purpose and the positive impact that they make on the continent. In between all of this, FluidRock had its conference in August with the theme, the business case of purpose, which Ronelle is going to be touching on, a little bit later as well. Our speakers were all kind of unpacking for us the role of purpose in different aspects of our business, our governance maturity, our stakeholders, our value creation models, our human resources, our technology, all of those different aspects. Because what we're also trying to the message we're trying to get across is the need for integrated thinking. I think we still see in the boardrooms where we move around a lot of silo thinking and approach to this topic, which is part of the problem why we're not sort of getting it right. So with that, Ronelle, I want you to kind of, because one of the things that FluidRock also is part of the journey that we brought on board quite some time ago, because it absolutely resonated with us, was ISO 37000. I don't think there are many other global organizations that actually have training, and we have our digital online course on ISO 37000. But at the heart of ISO 37000 is purpose. So, Ronelle, you want to kind of start talking to us a little bit about ISO 37000 and the relevance of purpose before I move again a little bit talking on a case study.
Thanks, Annamarie, and thanks for having me on your webinar. It's always great to talk about purpose. If you go to the next slide, you will see what is typically in ISO. This is a diagram that is in ISO. So we've spoken a lot about ISO 37000, but for those on the call who haven't heard about it yet, it is a ISO standard that was published in 2021. So it's a few years old now, but people are still getting to grips with this. But essentially, 166 countries have approved the ISO standard. It's a governance of organization. It's a big guidance document. Now, the reason they did that was that there was a need globally to have the same language or the same understanding around governance when there are conversations, either in country or in inter-country. And that was very important. I mean, in South Africa, we actually don't realize this, but corporate governance is an export. It's an export service. That's why we do so much work all around the world. But basically, it's an export because it is the home country of Prof. King. He did start a lot of the thought leadership on this. And then there's a lot of other really, really good people, including yourself, Carolyn Chalmers, etc., etc. And there were actually quite a lot of South Africans on the committee, or they call themselves the editors of the ISO standards. That's why a lot of the concepts are very familiar to South Africans. This is not the case globally. In a lot of countries, there is no country code on corporate governance. So, for example, if you look at the Middle East, if you look at Kenya, and if you look at Canada, there's no country code. So, and that's why there was this need. And also what that means is that different people across the world have a different interpretation of governance. I mean, what is the difference between compliance and governance? In Spain, they don't see the difference because there hasn't been such a concept as the concept of governance. Obviously, compliance is according to rules and regulations, and governance is doing the right things, right, in the right way. So what I like about ISO is that it's not prescriptive; it's a guidance document. But what is interesting is that at the center of ISO is purpose. It's your primary principle. So what the global thinking is around purpose is that if you don't have a clear understanding in your organization on what the purpose is, everything else might not work well. If it does, it's coincidental, or there could be other factors. But if you really want your organization to all look in the same way, the same direction, and achieve the same results, your thinking needs to come from your purpose, and it needs to be ingrained into the business. And it's tough. So it's the how. So if we go to the next slide, we internally at FluidRock have kind of just reshaped these into a different, I call it the ISO tree, because if you look in the ISO standard, there are governance conditions. These are things that should be in place to make sure your soil is really, really nutritious for your seeds to grow, for your tree to grow. And your primary principle is really your stem of your tree, right? It's the base of the tree. But without a good root system and soil, it can't grow. But if it wasn't for the tree, the stem of the tree, nothing else could be built on top of that. I mean, ultimately, what you want to do is you want to get to a place where you have very solid governance outcomes, and those are effective performance, which is a very, very important link between the business case of purpose, right? You want to perform. So it's not an add-on. Governance is not an add-on. It's a method in how you are going to achieve your performance. It's, of course, ethical behavior and responsible stewardship at every level of the organizations. So Annamarie, and it's, you hear it all across the world. And if you just Google, purpose in business, the business case of purpose, there's actually quite a lot of conversations globally that's happening around this topic. I think the challenge is maybe that organizations feel they might be too small. It's not for them. They don't have to do this. Or maybe it's not applicable to us. Maybe it's only for listed or whatever. And that is not the case. It's if you imagine your life, you've got different systems. You plug into different systems. There's a system at work, which is your organization. You need to know why you are there. Why do you give your discretionary effort? So this is very important for leaders, business, managers, HR people to understand. And then there is, for example, on your personal life, you might be part of a paddle, everyone is paddling. So you might be part of a paddle club. Like, what's the purpose of this paddle club? Is it to play paddle? Yeah, that's probably one thing, but it's probably a higher purpose. Beyond that, it's probably connecting people through a sport that's paddle, keeping active. There's probably an element of health, so it is in every area of your life. You should really ask them, let's clarify what is our purpose and what we are trying to do. If you look at the Olympics, you'll have sport is just the most amazing thing. And the Paralympics has just been incredible. I don't know if you've been watching, but I mean, the purpose is quite clear. It is to win, right? But I had a gym coach, and he was a weightlifter, or he is a weightlifter, very young guy, and he's tiny still, so he's in the lower classes. I don't know what the exact class is. Let's call it featherlight. And he said to me, I came last in the Olympics, but do you know how good you have to be to come last in the Olympics? So I think his purpose was to get there and just to participate. It wasn't necessarily to win. So individuals have different goals. And if you think about South Africa, it's not like we're going to the Olympics to think we're going to win on the medal list. It's to participate, right? If there is a medal, look how extremely happy the world is when our Paralympic tennis players got a medal. They didn't win gold, and we were just so extremely happy they got a year's welcome. So purpose is something that inspires us. It's something that makes us go places. But the reason why this is such an important element of corporate governance, it is, why are we doing something? And when you then in your organization, and we're going to look at it now, do things. What do you hook it on? What's your hooking point for any of your decisions, for any of your policies, procedures, your initiatives? And this is why purpose is so important in a business. And it wasn't really previously. So that's why it took some time to come right. And depending on your maturity in your organization, we're going to look at it a little bit later as well. It depends. So that is why ISO is a very nice standard. We train on it, and we're the first company globally that's training on it. And it's very interesting because the people in the room are from all across the world. So quite recently, we had a whole group of academics from Canada in the class on purpose, because what they are struggling with is in their university, in their environment, and because Canada doesn't have a governance framework, they are struggling to say, what do we hook our principles on what framework? And now because there's ISO, they can start saying, okay, let's take this as a guidance document and apply it in our environment, which is an academic environment. And that's becoming very interesting. And if you look at locally at the academic environments, just look at universities. One of the things that they have to start doing is they have to start developing third income streams. So we do a lot of work in the academic environment. So the first income stream is government money. The second income stream is student money. Now there's that whole fees must fall movement, right? And it's just bubbling, you know, what is happening with it. So the government said to universities, you need to start a third income stream. You need to start taking your IP that you develop and you need to capitalize on that and you need to develop that. Now those companies are being formed. Now, very, very interesting. Now, what is the purpose of that company? Now, some of these companies said is we need to make money for the university. Now, if you think about it, that is just like a normal organization saying we need to make money for your shareholder. And definitely, it's definitely one of the things that you have to do. And it's something that I feel very strongly about because without your shareholders and your capital, you won't, you know, get off the ground. But it's not the only thing. Right? So what is your purpose then as a university? Is it to really excel as a world-class leader in providing the world with technology and new IP so that it can further its goals? And one of the side benefits is that you can actually get an income. So this is why this is a very nice thing. A lot of companies in South Africa are saying we've got King, we're plump, but why do we need to do an international standard? And the answer is you don't have to. It depends on your organization. You have to look at it. Now, if you have a lot of international investors, my suggestion would be is to start this journey because you can start it internally and then start communicating what you're doing in time. There's also a very nice comparison document on the Institute of Directors website between the ISO 37000 and King, and they're very nicely aligned. However, I would say that ISO is almost like the next level. Also, ISO is non-jurisdictional, non-legislative, and it's guidance document, right? So it can be applied universally. So it is about, is it good for you? Do you have a lot of stakeholders internationally, or do you want to expand internationally? That's another thing. You might not be there now, but what we are seeing for nonprofit companies is that they have to prove that they've got good governance. And then they are asked to fill in the governance documents of that funder in that area. And then they have to scramble to that. And then the next, they get funding from Europe, for example, instead of the US, and then it's a different document. So what we're trying to say to NPCs is this is a very nice hook for you, where you can communicate with stakeholders from all across the world and say, listen, I see you've got your framework, which is awesome. We actually comply to this, because then you're going to save resources, time, which is quite valuable, of course, in any organization, but specifically a nonprofit company. So yeah, but Annamarie, yeah, maybe you can have a conversation with us more on examples and what you've seen on
I think,
or on purpose.
Ronelle, if I just gather from, just kind of summarize from what you've just said, is that one of the reasons we've really brought ISO 37000 to the table, it's FluidRock as one of our deliverables as well, is, apart from all the benefits that you've just given, the fact that the heart of it, the foundation of it, is purpose. And we absolutely buy into that. And I think one of the other important points that you make, it doesn't matter what the size of the organization is, that question around having clarity on purpose is essential for every organization out there, whether big or small. Now, for me, also looking at what I've experienced in the 34 years that I have been in boardrooms, it's a really evolve and it's about the leadership. Because a company, an organization, it's this legal person, but it doesn't have a mind. It doesn't have its own soul. So it's very dependent on the human beings in the boardroom who gets all of this, to take this organization on a purpose-driven, sustainable future. One such a leader that I've already alluded to is was Paul Pullman of Unilever. And Unilever, he was instrumental in bringing to the table what they call the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan. And that was their goals for sustainability and based on their purpose, founded on their purpose for 2010 to 2020. And I will show you just now how they've kind of, after 10 years, they took some stock on where they've made progress and where not. So it's a very busy slide, but I'll show that to you just now. But this is just, it's going to be difficult to show, but this is the book, Net Positive. And the subheading of the book, Net Positive, says how courageous companies thrive by giving more than they take. And for me, Paul Polman is an example of a leader that really gets this need for leadership, for human beings to unlock the soul of the organization. And in fact, he's one chapter in his book which talks to purpose, he calls unlocking the soul of the organization. And his concept about net positive, being that, as I've said in the subheading, that the ideas that we give more than what we take as organization, that we are able and we enable ourselves to improve the well-being for every stakeholder, everyone we impact, as you've highlighted, one of which is the shareholder, but every product, every operation, every region in which we operate and country, for all of our stakeholders, we need to be conscious of, how do we generate value for them. He calls this the North Star, that this was the North Star of Unilever. And he kind of asks a very profound question that we should ask ourselves as our organizations. Is the world better off because your business is in it? In your sphere of influence, whether it's huge, whether it's small, are you making that positive impact? So that is what they said at Unilever. And as I said, I think driven very profoundly by Paul Polman because of the type of leader and human being he is. I'm not going to go into detail. I just wanted to show you visually. This was their kind of taking stock of the progress that they had made from 2010 to 2020, which was the period of their plan, that incorporated all their different initiatives in these different areas around health and environmental and societal initiatives and impact that they had. But Paul says in his book, so that we get a little bit more practical, how do we know if our purpose is core to the strategy? And you will only know that, he says, if you can answer yes to these questions on the slide. Now, Ronelle is going to get our audience a little bit more involved in, and engaged in the session with some questions that she's going to post some polls on. But I wanted to also just ask you a few questions to take away. As I said, the purpose of this webinar is to get the conversation going, to give you some food for thought, to hopefully also take into your boardrooms. And for question number one, does your purpose contribute to increasing your growth and profitability today? So is it part of the growth and the performance, positive performance on the bottom line, the financial bottom line of the organization? Does your purpose significantly influence your strategic decisions and the choices of how you allocate your resources, your financial and human and your different capitals? Does your purpose shape your core value proposition? Do you know what your core value proposition is, and is it shaped by your purpose? And does your purpose affect how you build your team, how you manage your team, and your capabilities in your organization, and the allocation of your resources that I spoke about earlier on? And then finally, does it take up part of the agenda of your leadership in the boardroom at every board meeting? Is this part of the conversation? And in my personal experience, I think this is where there's still a lot of room for improvement and work to be done, and why it is that we have this conversation. Paul also, in his book, gives us some advice, which he says, if you as an organization, if you want to find your purpose and absolutely unlock the higher performance of your business, there's a few things you need to do. This calls for intentional, purposeful thinking, planning, acting. And he says a very important point: start go back. We, normally, that there's lots of different views and theories around hindsight and whether one, don't live in the past and all of those things, which is right. But many people have also said you can't design your journey, the path forward, if you don't understand where you're coming from. And so I can understand why Paul starts by saying, if you want to find your purpose, go back to where this all started. Why? There was a reason why this organization started. Go back to the original purpose. Unilever is a company, I forget now, but in the early 1800s, I think it's probably around 175 years old. Its first product in South Africa that came to our shores in the 1800s was sunlight. So if you use sunlight, that's thanks to Unilever that brought their products to South Africa more than a century ago. But the founder of Unilever was very passionate also about health and clean living, and that's why he started his business. So he said, let's go back to our roots, understand the original purpose, our reason for being, and then ensure to leverage our DNA so that we serve our stakeholders better. But if you understand where you came from, then you need to look forward to understand what in this changing VUCA, as Brand said the other day at our conference, VUCA on steroids world we live in. What does the world need? And how can our purpose serve the needs of the world and have that positive influence? Then you've got to get your house in order. And let me tell you, getting your house in order is not a one-day job. It is a journey. It is a continuous reassessing, redesigning, revisiting where we're going and what we're doing. But always linked to that North Star, that anchor, that hook that Ronelle was referring to as being our purpose. Getting the right signals out, putting your money where your mouth is. Ronelle can tell you, I personally have seen so many companies, that we do business with that and engage with, that will tell the outside world that they, responsible corporate citizens, that they stakeholder orientated. Yet when we start looking at their policies and charters and procedures, you can see that the singular focus is still on only one type of value creation, and that's creating value for shareholders. So, there's a misalignment between who they tell the world they are and who back at the ranch they actually are. And that has an impact on your legitimacy as an organization, and in turn, an impact on your relationship with your stakeholders. Getting our leaders to become authentic leaders. I think that is so critical, so that we really that we're consistent in what we say and what we do. And then finally as well, how do we bring our employees together? How do we help employees to find their own purpose and then to connect that with the purpose of the organization? So, Ronelle, this is in the Net Positive, in the book. As I say, I really want to encourage people. Many other case studies, many other companies that Paul referred to, and he quotes some of their purpose statements. But again, I want to say, those companies that today are kind of used to illustrate the responsible corporate citizens may not be on that same list tomorrow. And it's not because of the organization failing, it's about leadership failing the organization. So with that in mind, Ronelle, you want to kind of, I think, must hand back to you to talk a little bit about what do we find with leaders? What does leaders tell us about purpose and their organizations?
Thanks, Annamarie. There's a very nice study. In fact, I think you sent this to me on the business case of purpose that was done by the Harvard Business Review. And I just extracted some of the statistics because it's interesting, right? The first one is 89% of people actually believe in their personal capacity that purpose matters, that it's important for employees, for the business to perform, and for their clients. So lots of stakeholders, right? But what's interesting is that only 46% of people said that their business runs in a purpose-driven way. So there's a massive disconnect between people believing this and this happening in the organization. Okay. So if you go to the next slide, then I will open the poll, if everyone wouldn't mind participating. We just want to see kind of what does the people in the room say? What do you think? Do you believe purpose in an organization matters or not? And this is anonymous, we don't know, because it might not matter for everyone, right? Everyone is able to have their own view, so everyone can just give a view. So we've got 100% of people say in the room, it's not everybody's willing to able to vote, is saying so. So question number 1 is everyone of us saying yes, it matters. Okay, thank you for that, Annamarie. We go to the next one. Then if you go to, then it's do you think your organization is run in a purpose-driven way? What are your views? All right. So the votes are coming in. I'm just logging this as well. So what we are saying is 42% are saying yes, 38% are saying maybe, and 23% are saying no. Okay, so this is very similar to the findings. Thanks so much for everyone participating. So that's what we have. We've got 42% saying yes, 38% maybe, and no is 23%. So what this study says is that they have really seen 3 kinds of organizations. The first one in the yellow is your prioritizers. They really have done some work on purpose. The purpose in the organization is clearly articulated and understood. Then your developers, these are the green guys. Their purpose understood by some areas better than others, is not that clearly understood, but we're on our journey. And then I would say the laggards have not started. It's not understood. So go to the next slide, please, Annamarie. If you have to say in your company, would you say you're a prioritizer, a developer? Sorry.
Thank you. You can blame the antibiotics on
blame the antibiotics. Okay, so let's see. I mean, it might be similar to the guys in number 1, but what do you think? Do you think your organization's got it sorted, or do you think they're more in progress, or do you think we haven't started yet and that's your laggard? Okay, if everyone wouldn't mind voting for us. So very interesting results. 17% of us are saying we've got it sorted. 67% have said, listen, we're on our journey, we're there, and 15% are saying, listen, we haven't started, we need to start maybe looking at this. So thanks so much. So the next slide, please, Annamarie. So what's very interesting, if you ask anybody, if anybody asks you, maybe, what is the link between purpose and revenue? Because those are questions that gets asked, and it's really focusing on financial capital. But let's do that for a second, because some of our stakeholders are measured through financial capital, and that's important to be able to have a conversation with them. So what's very interesting is 58. This is not percent. This is kind of more the number of CEOs that were interviewed. 58 said that they have had of prioritizers. So let me clarify. 58, sorry, not percent. So the majority of prioritizers have said our business have grown by 10% or more. So this picture, and we will send the slides afterwards, is your answer to say the laggards, only 42 companies of 42 of them have said, listen, we have had 10% growth or more. But more importantly, if you look at the gray, 42 have said we've had a flat or a declining revenue base. Okay, and this is, I think, the important. If this is a very, very good slide. So let's go to the next one. So there's a clear link between having a clear strategy and a clear purpose, which will then flow into your strategy and everything and your performance of your business. And maybe it's because the business is formalized, and even larger companies are not necessarily formalized, but maybe even small companies can. So then this, what's very interesting is that there are top 5 barriers that the laggards have said that these are the reasons that they are struggling to incorporate purpose in their business. The first one is they're saying, listen, leadership is not communicating to us. But interestingly, if you look at the next one, they are saying, you know what, short-term shareholder pressure hinders us to focus on long-term value creation. So I think those two are linked. Because you have people that are short-term focused, then you don't communicate with your team because you actually don't have a plan. And so I think what's lacking is not the communication, it's the thinking about it, right? Then number 3 is the insufficient buy-in across the organization. That links again to, you know, it has to be driven from the top. And then, you know, your incentives are aligned, and then the systems infrastructure are aligned to your purpose. So these are interesting. So let's go to the next one, please, Annamarie. So what we will then have, let's see, what do you think, if any, so you don't have to pick, but if any of these, do you think are your top barrier in your organization? Why doesn't this one launch? Poll has been launched in this meeting. Oh, sorry, everyone. I think I have, it's a user problem. Sorry, I think here I can launch now. Okay, so if you can maybe, and I know it might be more than one, but if you can choose, what do you think in your business is a challenge, if at all? So let's see. All right. The votes are coming in quite strong. All right, so very interesting. 11% of people are saying it's poor communication. Oh, that's jumped. Sorry, I was a bit quick. 25%.
I think you've got everyone now. Yeah.
I've got everyone out. 23% of people are saying it's poor communication from leadership. 36% it's short-term shareholder who hinders it. Insufficient buy-in across is very low. It's 7%. And then staff performance incentives not linked. That's 21%. So that is something to look at. And then your systems and your infrastructure is not aligned. That is 14%. Sure. So this is very, very interesting. So what we're finding pretty much is the top 3 reasons are short-termism, comms, and then your performance isn't linked to the purpose of the organization. This is very interesting. Okay. So if you go to the next one, Annamarie, so what we're seeing is that our you know, for all of us online, it's very similar to the findings that they found in 2015, even though it's an older study. It's very, very similar. I don't know if it's because maybe it was US companies versus South African companies, who knows? But I thought that South African companies are actually quite, they lead more in this environment, because in South Africa, we are leaders in many, many things, right? But basically out of the study, Michael says that, listen, we can't just adopt it. It has to be driven by the CEO and the top leadership. If the CEO and the top leadership are not going to drive this, it's going to fall apart. So there absolutely has to be a belief in this. But if you go back to our, you don't have to go back, but if you think about our first slide, is about how many CEOs believe in their personal capacity, that purpose is really an important thing. It is 86%. So this is, I would say most of the organizations organize like, yes, we do. So it's external pressures, or let's call it pressures from other stakeholders that actually hinder you. So there's a massive communication gap that might be the case. Annamarie, if you go to the next one, this is a very interesting, I would say, diagram. On the left-hand side, you've got actual integration of purpose in the organization, and at the bottom, ideal. Now you see this trickle down from top right to top left. So what how I interpret this is that a lot of organizations are quite good in saying, what is our purpose in strategy development? That's when there's good alignment between, let's set a very nice strategy. And we all know the numbers. I mean, the number of strategies that's been implemented successfully are very low. It's extremely low. I mean, one of our clients, which was wonderful, we went on a balloon ride out in Kloofse, a hot air balloon ride, but it was a bit of symbolism, because it never got implemented, that beautiful strategy, you know, and it's because there's a missing link, you know, and there's many reasons for that. This topic is not about that. But similarly with purpose, when we go on our 2-day breakaway somewhere, we talk about it. but then it actually starts falling apart in the organization. Like branding is still quite strong, formation and communication of culture values is still quite strong, and then it starts trickling down. Is it in the business model? You know, and I want to take you to the bottom right quadrant. Sorry, guys. What is needed is leadership and development and training, because it's hard. How do we do this? Because no MBA that I'm aware of teaches this. Maybe they are. So if they are, and you can put it in the chat. By the way, if you've got any questions and everything, please put it in the chat. If any comments, we meant to say that in the beginning, but please put that in. But so this is where it is. It's like teach your people to do the rest, and most of this will fall into place, but not just at the top leadership level, right? At middle and junior level as well. Because then you can start pulling the link between what you're doing and that. So you can see right at the bottom, there's like supply chain management. I mean, talent management. We're a small organization, and we have lots of large organizations that only pays us in 60 or 90 days, which is massively hurtful on your cash flow if you're a small business. And I get it. And then one of my boards, one of the directors said, no, you've got to factor it, you know, and then you lose money again by factoring. So it's an interesting dilemma. But if your purpose is to really treat everybody well and fair, then maybe in your vendor management and your supply management, it will be interesting. And then look how important talent management is. I mean, every single CEO almost said that in terms of talent management, that the purpose is important to manage your team. And this is not there. I mean, it's hard. I mean, we're also struggling with this. We're implementing it, and slowly but surely through organizations. So I've indicated we're a developer, we're a level 2, we're definitely not a level 3, because how do you do this, right? And that again links into training, all right, and many other things, but definitely the will. So, and if you go to the next one, I see I must hurry up. This was an interesting kind of comments that I just pulled from the report. So if you allow me just to read it, it said, survey results suggest that prioritizers, firms, or the firms that prioritize, have grown and transformed vigorously more than their peers. And I had a graph on all the initiatives that they undertook successfully. So the initiatives undertaken by the firms that has prioritized purpose much more than the others. So there is a level of there's a virtuous positive cycle that's created, that it seems. And then executives of purpose prioritizing companies believe that their customers are more loyal, employees are more engaged, and they see themselves as market leaders and for the future. So it's sustainability. So all of this comes back to sustainability. It's like, if you want to be sustainable, make sure you have a proper purpose. And then all the other things, it's not only purpose, right? And they are reaping the rewards. And then organizations do better when everyone is rowing in the same direction. We all know this. Do we all row in the same direction? No. So how do you get people to row in the same direction? These are one of the ways. This is one of the ways. And then a well-integrated shared purpose casts that direction, right? So if you go to the next one, please, Annamarie, then these are the top 5 priorities according to Laggards. They said they need to develop a proper strategy. And I think that is the right place, right? Have your purpose, and then your purpose based on it. And if you look at the flow from in terms of ISO, it's really your purpose, your values, your value generation model, your strategy, your strategic pillars, or how you want to interpret it, then your balanced scorecard, and then you want to have your implementation plans, and then your SOPs. It depends on how your organization is structured. Not everyone follows that philosophy of the tail end of what I've just described, but that is what makes this so magical. So if you go to the next slide, and I just want to see, so there's one more poll. I think this is my last poll. If you wouldn't mind indulging me, it's to say, what do you think your top priorities are in your organization for you to take this further? Let me see if there's no user problem this time.
What it is or what it should be.
What do you think, Yes, in your opinion? Thanks, Annamarie. What do you think it should be if you were an advisor to your executives? Or if you are the executive, what do you think they should start with in this case? Okay, it's coming in nicely.
I will share the results for you,
Okay.
Ronelle. Let's just see if we get 1 or 2 more. I'm going to give it 10 more seconds.
Yeah, I think what's interesting, what we can start seeing is that the first one is leadership and development training. And then the second one is
Strategy
Strategy
development.
development. I definitely think this is a normal. People are saying no, not branding. That's a result. People are saying the business model, definitely, that's 21%. And then new business, that is 14%. And talent management, definitely is 7%. Okay.
Yeah, interesting. So people definitely also,
Yeah.
the leadership development is really about the leadership of the organizations.
Yes. So, I mean, guys, so it's definitely, if I can pull out the top two, then it's leadership and development. Next one is strategy development, which is the same scoring as business model. So it definitely goes like, what is our purpose? Then let's train the guys, and then let's work on a strategy, because we need to have the how before we can get to the how. So that's very interesting. So Annamarie, if we go to the next one.
So it's
I guess,
really kind of
yeah.
concluding for ours, but maybe, we've got 10 more minutes. I don't see any, as yet, I don't see any comments or questions, unless I'm missing it, so people can let me know. But listening to what you were saying, Ronelle, just now, it's I saw a statement in Paul Polman's book where he talks about the concept of creating value through your values. And I think, that's part of what you've been talking about as well in the book. And I wanted to actually put that as a quote in our slides. And I will still do that. So when we send the slides to the participants, that you will have this quote in here as well. Because to me, it also talks to what Ronelle and I was talking about earlier on, that this is not only relevant for large listed companies, international, global organizations. This goes down to each and every organization that has stakeholders that makes an impact on the world. And in the intro to the chapter on unlocking the company's soul, the author quotes the founder of Unilever, Lord William Lever, and who apparently I've read a long time ago about him, was apparently quite an autocratic leader, but very much also driven by his personal values. But he is said to have made the following statement: nothing can be greater than a business, however small, that is governed by conscience. And nothing can be meaner or more petty than a business, however large, governed without honesty and brotherhood. And, and that's why I appreciate and all of you in the room for highlighting and kind of being aligned with what I think is my theory and my view as well, that it starts with the leadership. It starts with the values, of our organization, understanding our North Star, our purpose, what values we need to pursue that purpose, and then how that translates into strategy and systems and business models, etc. It really calls for intentional, courageous leaders. And I think that's what you've been trying to say as well. It's we know why we have to do this. It's a no-brainer. But we are still finding, and if I think about your slide on the barriers, I could relate to so many of those. That's one of the reasons, if you, for example, consider now in South Africa, the change to the Companies Act, where shareholders are now given, for public companies, given the opportunity to vote on remuneration policies and the implementation of it. Now, depending on the purpose and the values and the strategy of your investors, they may be pursuing a very much self-interest, short-term agenda, which means that they will, in all probability, favor a remuneration structure and policy that brings about short-term decision-making to get that short-term, benefit. And that's why I've always been really not in favor of giving one of your stakeholders the power to define the direction often and the agenda. Do you see that kind of shareholder short-term agenda still being quite prevalent?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because what you're doing is you're giving one stakeholder quite a lot of power with the internal mechanisms within an organization. And one of the reasons that that's been done is because it's been seen that organizations are abusing remuneration. And that because South Africa is the country that has the worst Gini coefficient, so the highest paid and the lowest paid is the biggest disparity, it feels unfair. And yesterday I saw a thing, it will take someone working in Starbucks something like 186 days to make 1 day's worth of, or 1 month's worth of salary for a CEO. If you think about it like that, it does seem very, very out of kilter. However, if you think about the kind of people that are able to lead large organizations, they are rare, it's a scarce skills, and it's supply and demand. So I'm a very big supporter of large payouts to executives, but it needs to be in line with the company's purpose, or with the rest of the organization, or with it needs to be in line with the shareholder value created as well, right? There needs to be some sort of parity between all of this, because it's when it's out of kilter that people get very upset. Now, what is nice, if you think about the sustainable investment codes, that most of them are saying that remuneration policies has to be a mix, and has to be measured, and it has to be, which is very, very interesting. And a lot of companies in South Africa in the listed space struggle to get their remuneration policies through, because a lot of times shareholders are not upset with the remuneration policy per se, but it's one of the only mechanisms that they can use to say, no, I'm not voting for this. In one of the AGMs of a listed company of a colleague of mine, what happened is the shareholders were going to vote against the remuneration of the directors, to approve the remuneration of the directors. Then at the meeting, they changed it because they were upset that they were non-executive directors that had interest in the business. Then they amended the resolution to say, okay, we will approve the independent non-executive director pay, but not the non-executive director pay. And then there was a group of people who could not receive any funds, and they pretty much were asked to resign. But I mean, they wanted to stay because they wanted to influence the business based on their other, connections with the organization, which is very interesting. So Merwe, I think this can go both ways, and I think it will be depending on the company. And this is why it's so important that in the institutional investor space, that is used very carefully.
Yeah, absolutely. And to the point that was also raised in one of our earlier slides, Ronelle, communication. The way we communicate all of this, so that we, through communication, I think it's John Maxwell that says, speak the truth. Transparency breeds the legitimacy. If, breeding and building legitimacy with your stakeholders through communication, through explaining the thinking, but being consistent in application of who you say you are with what you say and what you do, are absolutely critical, because people see right through the smoke and mirrors that we see. Ronelle, we're running out of time. We've got 2 minutes left. I don't think there were any comments. We either have stunned our audience, or we've sufficiently confused them in this hour on this Friday afternoon, or they're worried that we're going to continue if they ask any questions past our 1 hour, which we never do. But whatever the reason for that, we trust it was of value to all of you as well. We are hoping that you will join us for our next in conversation with on 15th of November, when we will have 1 or 2 external parties again talking about how they pursue their purpose and how that has helped them to create the value that they want to create, not only for the organization, but also for all their stakeholders. So with that, from my side, Ronelle, thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate it. Thanks to all of you in the room, and wishing you a good Friday. Thanks, Ronelle.
Thanks so much, Annamarie. It's always great to chat, and thanks everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mpayo. Okay.